Welcome back. Today we have a question for you. Where do you see yourself working in 5 years' time? In a rapidly changing world, that is becoming harder to answer. The World Economic Forum predicts that by 2030 we'll have 170 million new jobs, but nearly 92 million, they will have disappeared. That's not all. The new Employment Rights Act came into law here in December. Over the next 2 years, phase changes will affect many workers' rights, including parental leave, unfair dismissal and redundancy. Now, these changes are mostly good news for workers, but some experts say they could also make employers more cautious about hiring. Some might even lay people off before the new rules take effect. So what could this mean for you? Well, if you're job hunting, expect more competition. And if you're working but your job feels at risk, now is the time to prepare so you can bounce back if redundancy does happen to you.
Walked in, the tissues were on the table, the head of HR was there with the new boss, and I was out.
And I think at the time it was very scary, but she kind of looked at it and was like, well, actually, this opened so many more doors. So she went back to university and finished a degree.
The thing to do is go out to your friends and to people that you've worked with before and say, what do you think I'm good at?
With me to talk about redundancy, I have Jimmy McLoughlin. He's a former Downing Street advisor. He's chief podcaster at Jimmy's Jobs of the Future, the UK's most trusted careers podcast. Is that right? Did you just say that? Is it true?
I'm not sure where that's come from. It is now.
It is now. It says so on your website, so, I'm reading it out. Impressive guest list. I have to say, you've had some heavy hitters, including the Prime Minister.
Yes, which is very interesting in terms of job security.
Eleanor Mills, she is a former editorial director of the Sunday Times. She's founder of Noon, which is a platform which helps women find a new path through midlife and beyond. She's also the author of the bestseller Much More to Come. And from PensionBee this time, we're joined by Training and Culture Manager Emma Ferenc-Batchelor. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for coming in. Here's the usual disclaimer before we start. Please do remember, anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial advice or as legal advice. And when investing, your capital is at risk. Now, I'm going to ask you all the obvious first question. Have any of you ever been made redundant?
Yes.
OK. What happened?
It was horrible. It was really, really grim. I'd been at my old newspaper for 23 years. I was the editorial director. I was the editor of the Sunday Times magazine. I got a call asking me to go up and see the new editor. I went up with all my stuff for the next 6 months, all my jolly
Yeah,
things.
I think you were going to be talking about it.
Yeah, I just interviewed Sheryl Sandberg. It was all good, world exclusive. Walked in, the tissues were on the table, the head of HR was there with the new boss, and I was out. It was...
Wow.
It was a truly horrible, surreal moment, a bit like being in a car crash or, that when you get that real dissociation. I was sitting in that office and watching the tugboats chug up the Thames and the seagulls flying around the kind of Southwark Cathedral, and just knowing in that moment that my life was never going to be the same again. It had been my life from when I was 21 to when I was 50, and I suddenly realised that I was going to have to start again.
Horrifying. And you've had this too, Jimmy?
Well, yes.
In a sense.
In a sense, slightly
situation.
different. But it's quite interesting because people are probably quite interested in what happens when a Prime Minister changes. So I was a special advisor to Theresa May and I was there for the entire 3 years. But people will remember that Theresa May's premiership wasn't the most sort of stable of times. So you were constantly aware that this may all come to an end this week. So what happens when a Prime Minister leaves is that all the political appointees, which are special advisors, all sort of leave. And you literally wave the Prime Minister who goes and gives the speech outside number 10. You wave them out in the corridor at the front, and then you are ushered out the back door.
Literally that.
Literally, that is what happens. And then the new Prime Minister Boris Johnson had asked me to kind of like stay on for a little while, so one of just a couple that had happened to. And after sort of a few weeks, we were about to have our first baby and whatever, and it was really time for me to do something else. So I sort of took kind of almost voluntary redundancy, I suppose you might say. So that was 2019, and I thought, well, I just needed a bit of headspace to work out what I was going to do in my life next, and so on. If I'd known there was going to be a pandemic coming 6 months later, I might have taken one of the jobs that was offered to me as I left. But then I had a sort of enforced period of thinking about it.
I mean, I am going to say you two are complete outliers here. I mean, most people, when they get made redundant, they don't have jobs like yours. I mean, they're just people who have that sort of meeting you described, a shorter version usually with an HR person there and a box of tissues, if that. and they're out the door thinking, how do I pay the mortgage next month?
Yeah.
It's quite interesting because, I mean, I haven't personally gone through redundancy, but I've experienced it vicariously through my mum. And she was like single parent. We were just at the age where we were becoming quite independent. So like end of primary school, start of secondary school. And I think at the time it was very scary, but she kind of looked at it, was like, well, actually, this opened so many more doors. So she went back to university and finished a degree. She had gone from TfL, driving a tube. Actually, like, maybe this is the time to kind of put into gear the things I do want to do. And then she got a degree and then went to actually work for UCU. So it was kind of a fresh start. So it was, for me, it's like redundancy doesn't always seem like a negative.
She sounds so impressive. I mean, I've got to say, having been a single parent myself, that would not have been my first thought if I'd lost work and I was looking at paying all the bills by myself. I'm not sure I would have been as positive as your mum sounds.
Yeah,
she was.
at the start, she was like, how are we going to do this? But I think because we were at that age where we were becoming independent, we were like, okay, somewhat became like latchkey kids. Me and my sister kicked into gear. It was like, maybe we should actually learn how to cook now.
Yeah.
There are positives if you can get there. But Emma, I do want to ask you about the nitty-gritty of this, because there is talk of job cuts. It's a tight labour market right now. And it's fair to say employers, they're under pressure. We've got national insurance contributions going up. We've got wage pressure. And I did mention the Employment Rights Act kicks in this year and next year.
Yeah.
Do you want to just run us through? This is a big piece of legislation. There's a lot to it. Because one of the things that struck my eye was that we've got kind of ordinary parental leave and paternity leave. They're going to become day one rights. Is that right?
Yeah, so that will be parental leave and unpaid parental leave. Also with sick pay, so that's the statutory sick pay. So that would be from the first day of employment.
Okay. And protections from unfair dismissal. That becomes a right. I think it was going to be a day one right, wasn't it? But now it's going to be, 6 months
Yes,
in?
so that was originally, that would have been in play from 2 years.
Okay, so that's a big change that employers need to take on board. Obviously, helpful for workers.
Yes.
Okay, so helpful for working people. But obviously, I mean, Jimmy, from an employer's point of view, if we look at it in the round, that's going to make some employers think twice about hiring, isn't it?
I mean, there's a huge amount with this at the moment for businesses because, as you mentioned at the top, you've got the national minimum wage going up, you've got the NICs going up, you've got the employment rights, you've also got sort of geopolitics and the tariffs happening, and you've also got the kind of rise of AI as well. So the first three of those things are all government kind of interventions, and it's a lot for business to ask to do all at once, right? Like any one of them, they would probably complain about, to be fair, but it's a lot all at once. And if you are an employer and I've now got access to all these amazing AI tools and so on, it does end up forcing you to think about that more, because actually, and this has happened now for 15 years or so, the national minimum wage has gone up like a huge amount. Basically now, if you work full time, you're pretty much on £30,000. Like it's gone up like exponentially. And of course, for an employer, they've got NICs on top of that as well. So it's just like, it's been one of these things that's happened.
Yeah, so understandably, employers are going to be cautious. Obviously, they're always cautious about hiring. They're going to be potentially more cautious. And there is some talk of potential redundancies ahead of some of this legislation kicking in next year. So would it be fair to say that, obviously, jobs, it's a tight market already. It could be tighter soon.
I think that's true. I think we will get into the position where we'll see sort of the likes of Amazon, hiring more robots and so on. Like, it's pretty extraordinary.
So where are the new jobs going to come from then? Because, if we hear all these numbers up, millions of jobs, existing jobs disappearing and all these new roles coming, what are they going to be?
Well, of course. So this used to be my job in number 10, right?
Yeah.
I would get the phone call at 5 to 8 from Wilkinson's or Debenhams saying, we're about to go into administration. We're going to make sort of 10,000 people redundant. And I would go in and tell the PM this joyous news, to which she would react with, Jimmy, all you ever tell me about is job losses. But there are lots of interesting roles that are out there. And I think actually, if you're building or switching careers at the moment, arguably there's never been a more exciting time to do it. I think there's more opportunity out there, there's more jobs being created, but they're not the jobs that you grew up knowing.
So thinking about what people might do in that situation, if you're thinking about if your job's looking at risk and you're not in a very ritzy job and you do need to pay the bills, where should you be aiming if you're thinking about what sectors are actually going to be flourishing for me?
you've kind of got the obvious ones like AI, technology, creator economy, etc. What I think could be interesting is this kind of the human face-to-face jobs, right? And I look at sort of elderly care being a primary one of this. Like, having done 250 episodes of Jimmy's Jobs of the Future, people always ask me what the future looks like, and I'm like, I don't know anything about the future. You can't predict with certainty at all. But the one thing you can predict is demographics.
Sure.
And we're going to have lots of older
Aging
people.
society.
And I think that's a big thing. And I think the hope with AI is that it will be able to sort of automate a lot of the admin work that people have, and people are actually able to do the job of caring for people.
I think there is a bit of scaremongering in regards to how, like, what jobs will exist and how the employment industry will look. But I think technology related jobs are like the fastest growing in like percentage terms. So I think people need to be looking at stuff around data, AI. So it's kind of looking at the language. So it's like fintech engineer or machine learning specialist. I think it seems like jobs are shrinking or maybe disappearing, but I think it's more just pivoting.
I think so. People have to think of themselves as kind of like a T-shape, right? Like, you want to have a deep skill in something, but then you want to be sort of trying to add these bits onto the side as well. Like, one of the interesting jobs that I think, is not sort of that academic necessarily, is like community managers, right? Like, all these companies now are sort of like, they talk about community, and I'm sure PensionBee does use a lot of this. It's part of this podcast, right?
Sure.
Like, it's sort of building that out, and I think that's a more interesting area as well for people, that they can kind of get involved with, learn how to build and be involved in the communities.
What I also see amongst my midlife women is that they're actually radically reskilling. And they're taking up things like being an electrician or plumber or carpenter, or becoming therapists or coaches, or doing things which the AI won't be able to do. We're always going to need people to decorate our homes. That's not something that AI can do. Being a therapist, actually, it's quite important to speak to a real person.
Yes.
We were talking about caring roles earlier. So I think it's also, or gardening, it's thinking about the things that the AI is never going to be able to do. And I see some really exciting kind of midlife women taking up really new skills, setting up their own building companies, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's also worth, yes, the T thing, adding some things onto what you already do. But I think if you're made redundant, particularly at midlife, thinking that we're going to be here for the 100-year life, many of us, we're all going to live a lot longer than we think, is A, we're lots of us are going to be made redundant and have to start again and reskill. And that B, at 50, if you're actually going to have another working life of 25, 30 years, it's worth reskilling. It's actually worth maybe learning something new.
Can we just look back to who's most at risk of job loss here? Because I know, Eleanor, middle-aged women, it's, you're high risk, right?
Well, there's a lot of gendered ageism in the culture. And certainly, what I've seen within my community. So we now have a community which is 100,000 strong of women in midlife. We call them queenagers. And we see that a lot of women, as they hit 50, hitting gendered ageism, which is where ageism hits sexism. And I think that there's certainly within the corporate world likes women to be pleasing, physically pleasing, and also kind of, emotionally pleasing. And I think younger women are much more likely to tick both of those boxes. And as you get a bit older, a bit more experienced, a bit more bolshy, you've been round the block a few times, it's not your first rodeo, you're much more likely to go, well, don't think that's going to work. We did that 5 years ago. Or no, actually, I think we should do this. And I think that less pleasingness in women is still a bit of a challenge. I was talking to the head of SmartWorks the other day, who try and get women back into careers, and they say that they see it takes twice as long for a woman over 50 to get a job as it does for the younger women.
Okay.
So this is a very, very real thing. The Menopause Society also say that 1 in 10 women are leaving jobs or being pushed out of jobs as they hit this age.
Those of us who've had kids know how hard it was to get decent work part-time when you were trying to combine it with childcare. Well, certainly that was my experience. Most of my friends, real struggle there, and a lot of women end up taking quite low-grade jobs to make that work. So all this stuff might make people more vulnerable to job loss.
And I think for redundancy in midlife, what I see with a lot of the women is a lot of them have had a very kind of what people now call a squiggly career. If you haven't had a very kind of linear kind of career progression, and that's true for a lot of women because they've taken time out for caring, they are quite often find it difficult to tell a coherent, succinct narrative about exactly who they are and what they've done. So one of the things that we do at Noon is we do this rebrand course where we help people with what their story is. And if you can get your own story right, which takes in some of the setbacks as well as the triumphs, then you create a very kind of cogent and human story to help people with. So I find that that's something that's really useful for people when they're restarting.
Hi, it's me, Philippa, just interrupting for a moment to say a big thanks to all of you who've subscribed to the Pension Confident podcast. Our mission is to help you feel more financially confident, and we are thrilled with the community we're growing here on YouTube. If you haven't already done it, hit that subscribe button right underneath this video so you never miss an episode. Meantime, enjoy the rest of this month's conversation. I want to loop back further to the point at which you lose your job. Emma, are you able to talk to this? What are your rights? What sort of notice period? What sort of consultation?
So in regards to notice period, it's about a week for every year that you work. So that's up to 12 weeks notice period. You should also get consultation with your employer. So essentially, that's it's opportunity for them to speak with you, to inform you why you're being made redundant, if there's any alternatives to redundancy, and if your employer is making up to 19 redundancies, there's no rules about how they should carry out the consultation.
That helped me, to be honest.
But in regards to pay...
So this is the statutory
Yes.
redundancy pay, isn't there?
So you need to be there for 2 years and you need to be an employer, so it can't be contractor or freelancer.
So this is a really key thing to know, isn't it? If you're listening to this right now and you're on contract, and of course millions of people are, let alone gig work, or you haven't been there, even if you are an employee, for 2 years, nothing. They're not required to give you a single penny. No. So this really speaks to the need for pre-planning, doesn't it?
And we see a lot of people being made redundant just as their 2-year contract comes up. So just at the point where they're beginning to get employment rights, they get whacked.
So
we see that a lot.
Key thing for everyone to understand. Okay, but if you have been there for 2 years, it's about your age.
Yeah, so if you'll get half a week's pay for each full year that if you're under 22, it's 1 week's pay for each full year if you're 22 and older, but under 41, and 1.5 weeks pay for each year if you're 41 and older. So an example of that would be if you're made redundant on the 1st of January this year, you're 42 years old, and you've been working for about 5 years and earning about, let's say, £767 a week, so that's just under 40k.
Okay.
Your statutory redundancy payment could be just under 4,000.
Wow,
I'm going to say that is not a lot of money, is it, in today's world? Yeah. It's not going to take you very far, is it? So that takes me to my next question then, which is about preparing for this horrible reality. We're a personal finance podcast in many ways. Let's talk about what you should do, because you're going to need a cash cushion, aren't you, to at least tide you over. Presumably, we haven't talked, don't we, Emma, about this 6-month cash cushion, but it's hard to get 6 months money together, isn't it, of 6 months of your outgoings?
Yes, that's definitely something that I'm doing, and I know that it's, especially living in London, it can sometimes feel quite impossible, but I think as cliche as it is, every little helps. And I think kind of starting with this, I think that's one of the things I actually quite learned in university. It's like a small nest egg can keep rolling, keep going. So I think that, yes, trying to get that 6 months fund is a good starting point.
I mean, I must say, if I was employed right now and I was thinking my job was fragile, I'd probably be cutting out any unnecessary expenditure, wouldn't you? Just be thinking about, do you really need whatever it is you've got your eye on in the sales right now?
Funny enough, one of the things I always kind of say to myself with regards to saving is, if you can't afford to buy it twice, then you can't afford it. Because I always think, if I can't afford to replace it, then I can't afford it. So that's kind of my way of trying to reel my spending back in.
I mean, when you two have experienced jobs, obviously you worked a long time for your employer, so I'm assuming they had to pay you a big fat redundancy check for you to go.
I've been there nearly 25 years.
Yeah, so great.
So I had a cushion. But what I see with many women within my community is this, and we really encourage this, is that idea of having a kind of walk-away fund, so that you do have some choices, or if the worst thing happens, you have a kind of nest egg. And I I also think that in today's world, it's always good to have a bit of a side hustle. Actually, what saved me was that I did have a side hustle. I'd been chair of women in journalism for the last 7 years. So when I lost my job at the Sunday Times, I had a whole network of people and I stood for something which wasn't just me and the job that I had. Because I think too many of us, and particularly women, put a lot of effort into networking within their own company or kind of, chatting people up in their company, but they're not thinking of that more broad network. And I think that what saves you when you get made redundant, and there's a lot of evidence that you're 5 times more likely to get a job through someone in your network than you are from just applying cold. So I think it's really thinking about enriching all those ties that might help you if you suddenly lost your job tomorrow.
In regards to networking, I think sometimes people can get a little bit caught up in that networking needs to be specifically with like employment, and you don't realize, like, I don't know, kind of just doing social activities, they might like start a conversation with someone like, oh, you're working in the field that I want to work in, like, give, like, so let's swap numbers, let's have a chat, like, what do I need to do to kind of get into that? And people don't realize that, like, it could just be a question away, or it could be like a meeting away, and it's like, it doesn't always have to be like in a in a massive hotel, like corporate set, so I think in a champagne dinner kind of thing, like, you might just be sitting next to someone on the bus and you start a conversation, you're like, actually, great contact, let's keep in touch.
It's those loose connections.
I also think the key thing to do is go out to your friends and to people that you've worked with before and say, what do you think I'm good at?
Yes.
Because actually,
that's a really interesting idea. Your own skills audit.
It's really hard sometimes to be self-analytical of your own skill sets. And also you have a tendency to think of the stuff that you're good at is that everyone's good at and they enjoy as well. And that's actually not true. Like, we've all got sort of different makeups and different brains and so on. So I think that's my sort of tip to try and do that. You have to you go for lots of coffees with people and sort of try and get feedback on yourself.
When it happened to you, though, I mean, I know you kind of knew at some point it was going to come because of the nature of the work you were in. But when it actually happened, when it was that day,
yes, how
did it feel? I bet it was still somehow a shocking experience.
Yeah. It felt very sort of. That has been my life, and that has sort of like defined me. And,
now what?
Jimmy from Number 10, right? And now just Jimmy.
It's really hard, when a big plank of your life is suddenly ripped out from under you, and the first thing to do is just to pause and to be kind to yourself. Yeah. So I started swimming in the pond on Hampstead Heath every day when I was made redundant, and that shot of joy kept me going.
It's true, though. It's an injury, isn't it? It's an injury that's inflicted on you. Personal, professional, and financial.
Shame. There's a big amount of shame in this. So when I first left the Sunday Times, I wrote about how it felt to be made redundant in the Telegraph. And I had about 10,000 people get in touch with me saying, it's a bit like death. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to kind of come near you, feel a bit like you're kind of contaminated.
Still. Yes. It's such a common thing, redundancy.
No, but the shame around redundancy is huge. And that's why, it's partly why I wanted to come on this podcast to talk about it, because people don't talk about how awful it feels. So what I would say to people is, take a breath. Remember that you were only able to do that thing because you have some innate qualities.
Well, that brings us to support, doesn't it? Because as you say, there's a lot of support out there, and you don't necessarily have to pay for an expensive career coach to get it, do you? There's lots online of high caliber support, career coaching. No, you're looking dubious.
No. Do you want to know something that I did the other day with ChatGPT?
Oh, yeah.
I said, take everything you know about Jim McLoughlin and everything that I've spoken to you about.
That was bold.
Yeah. And predict my career for the next 30 years.
That's such an interesting thing. What did it say?
Well, it was fascinating, right? Because it was like reading potentially the future and all the different paths you could do. And also what it sort of made me think afterwards was, actually, it's not that impressive what it did, because it knows I'm interested in media and politics and entrepreneurship. So actually,
you told it everything about yourself.
Well, I sort of talk to it sort of semi-regularly and whatever, right? It knows who I am. It knows I do the podcast.
But if it didn't, if you came to this new, you just sit down and tell it everything about yourself.
But I think, just be like, act as a careers coach for me, ask me 10 questions, and it will be amazing the kind of like prompts that it sort of comes out with and so on.
Because we talk about this because we use AI, but lots of people don't ever use it. So you can do this, it's free.
You can do or you pay for a premium account, £15 a month or whatever it is, and you have access to quite a good careers coach there for sort of like at least to sort of get
starter.
A starter. It's a good place to sort of start.
Obviously, there are lots of caveats around the accuracy of stuff that you might get back from AI, but I think it is good on that practical front, isn't it, Emma?
Yeah.
getting your ducks in a row.
Yes, I think it's a good place to start with the research and then kind of go from there. So it kind of helps you. I think it makes it a little bit less scary because I know when you type things into Google, it's like thousands of pages. It can be a bit like, where do I start?
Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of getting a strong feeling that we could have talked about this for a whole other hour. So thank you very much, everyone. It's great having you with us.
Having us.
Yeah, it's been great. We could have talked about it all day.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying this series, please do rate and review us so other listeners, just like you, can find us. If you've missed an episode, don't worry about it. You can catch up anytime on your favourite app. We're on YouTube. We're in the PensionBee app too, if you're a PensionBee customer. Next month, we're going to be discussing the single tax. How much is it costing you not being coupled up? And just a final reminder, anything discussed on the podcast shouldn't be regarded as financial advice or as legal advice. And when investing, of course, your capital is at risk. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.